Welcome back to our verse-by-verse walk through the book of Proverbs. I'm Pastor Lance, and this is episode 6. Now, last time, as we were taking a look at Proverbs chapter 4, we watched wisdom pass like a torch from David to Solomon and then to Solomon's son. 3 generations handing off what mattered most. The central image was the path, which road you're on, which direction you're heading, and what you're building toward, one deliberate step and choice at a time. Today we cover chapter 5, and I'll warn you up front, Solomon gets specific, very specific. He's a father who's watched too many wreck their lives on avoidable reefs, and he's not in the mood to be delicate in his warnings to his son. This is wisdom with its work boots on. Verses 1 and 2 of Proverbs chapter 5. My son, pay attention to my wisdom, lend your ear to my understanding, and that you may preserve discretion and your lips may keep knowledge. Before we dive into the main event, let's see what Solomon's doing in this chapter, because a surface reading leaves us a bit confused, or maybe even somewhat scandalized by what he says here. Solomon is about to employ an extended metaphor. Folly, that is that kind of bone-deep, life-wrecking foolishness that he urges his son to avoid, is personified as a seductive, morally bankrupt woman. Now please understand, Solomon is not saying that all women are like this, not even most are. He's speaking to his son, who, like young men across time and space, is most likely governed by his eyes. Solomon knows his audience, and so he uses an image that lands with maximum impact. Think of it as the ancient Near Eastern equivalent of a public health poster. The imagery is vivid because the danger is real. With that framing in place, we read, verse 3, "For the lips of an immoral woman drip honey, and her mouth is smoother than oil. But in the end she is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet go down to death, her steps lay hold of Sheol. Lest you ponder her path of life, her ways are unstable. You do not know them." So he speaks of honey, of oil. It's the language of sweetness, of smoothness, the vocabulary of everything appealing. And then he refers to wormwood, and it's a two-edged sword that brings death. Wormwood is a bitter herb that was used medicinally since antiquity. It's so unpleasant when the Apostle John in Revelation describes a star that poisons the rivers of the earth. He names it wormwood. The contrast that Solomon is drawing isn't at all subtle. What begins tasting like dessert ends up so bitter, so incredibly sour, your face goes into a wild contortion and you try to spit it out, but you can't. This isn't an insight unique to the Bible. The Roman poet Lucretius, almost a millennium after Solomon, described how physicians gave bitter medicine to children by first coating the rim of the cup with honey. The child would drink what would heal them before realizing it was unpleasant. Solomon reverses that image. Folly coats destruction with sweetness. The cup looks like dessert, but its content is poison. Verse 7, "Therefore hear me now, my children. Do not depart from the words of my mouth. Remove your way far from her, and do not go near the door of her house, lest you give your honor to others, and your years to the cruel one. Lest aliens be filled with your wealth, and your labors go to the house of a foreigner, and you mourn at last when your flesh and your body are consumed. And say," let's just pause right there. So now listen to the regret and to the shame that we read about in verse 12. "And say, how I have hated instruction, and my heart despised correction. I've not obeyed the voice of my teachers, nor inclined my ear to those who instructed me. I was on the verge of total ruin in the midst of the assembly and congregation." Note how complete the damage is. It's not just spiritual. It's not just relational. It's financial, it's physical, it's reputational. Solomon says that you surrender your honor, your years, your wealth, your strength, everything that you've built is given away to someone who never had your interests at heart for even a moment. If you ever sat across from someone whose life has detonated, and trust me, after enough years in pastoral work, you do, this is almost verbatim what they say. Now, not in those exact words maybe, but in the substance, it's always the same. I knew better. I was warned. I didn't listen. And now I have to live with it. You know, there's a Greek word for this. It's ananoresis. It's a dramatic moment of recognition, when a character finally sees clearly what they couldn't or wouldn't see before. In Greek tragedy, it arrives too late. Solomon hands his son that recognition before the tragedy happens. That's what good parenting is and does. It tries to give children the insight of experience before they have to earn it the expensive way. Then Solomon pivots, and we slow down now because he says something that gets quoted in marriage counseling to this day. Verse 15, drink water from your own cistern and running water from your own well. Should your fountains be dispersed abroad, streams of water in the streets? Let them be only your own and not for strangers with you. Let your fountain be blessed and rejoice with the wife of your youth. For those living in the ancient Near East, water was survival. A man's cistern was his household's lifeline. Contaminating it or wasting it was a catastrophe, not a lifestyle choice. Solomon's metaphor here hits with force, and then the poetry becomes unmistakable. Verse 19, as a loving deer and a graceful doe, let her breast satisfy you at all times, and always be enraptured with her love. For why should you, my son, be enraptured by an immoral woman and be embraced in the arms of a seductress? Hey, this isn't Victorian prudishness dressed up in religious language. You know, the Bible is remarkably forthright about the goodness of sexuality within its proper context. An entire book of the Bible, the Song of Solomon, is pretty much a sex manual for married couples. Its language is poetic, it uses a lot of metaphor, but it's pretty clear that he's talking about lovemaking. God is not embarrassed by the physiology that he designed. What he's clear on is context. Sexual intimacy is for a husband and wife, covenantally committed, building a life together. That's the cistern. That's where the water belongs. You know, C.S. Lewis once made the point that a culture obsessed with food, in the way that our culture is obsessed with sex, would strike anyone and everyone as bizarre and disordered. We'd recognize immediately that something had gone sideways with that culture. We don't always make the same recognition when it comes to sexuality, perhaps because the distortion has become so normal. Solomon says it poetically but plainly. The appetite is good, the disorder is not. Verse 21, for the ways of man are before the eyes of the Lord, and he ponders all his paths. His own iniquities entrap the wicked man, and he's caught in the cords of his sin. He shall die for lack of instruction, and in the greatness of his folly he shall go astray. The chapter closes with a reminder that puts a floodlight on everything that came before. Nothing is hidden. The person who excuses their private behavior by rationalizing, saying no one was going to know, that person's mistaken. Hebrews 4:13 echoes this when it says, all things are naked and open to the eyes of him to whom we must give account. Solomon says that a man's sin binds him like rope made of his own choices, wrapped around himself. That's the anatomy of consequence. Now in Proverbs chapter 6, Solomon changes course for a bit, but then comes back to the seductress. But we're going to save that for our next study.